There's a legend that the first chief rabbi of Israel, Rabbi Avram Yitzchak, a Kohen cook, when he came to Israel, he saw a cow, and he said, an Israeli cow, and he kissed the cow. We cannot verify if this story is true, but anyone who writes about Rav Kook says it doesn't make a difference, because it could have been true. But the real source of that story is probably a Gemara in Ksubis, where we have a few Rebbes that show unbelievable love for Eretz Yisrael, and I want to begin with them before we move into our people from the modern era. Rav Kook comes from somebody named Rabbi Abba. The Gemara says at the very end of Ksubis, Rabbi Abba Menashe Kifi Da'ako. When he would visit Akko, he would kiss the rocks. That's how much he loved Israel. So of course you know, I'm sure Rabbi Weisblum has taught you, there's a Mishnah in Pirkei Avot, Hafach ba v'hafach ba dekula ba. Turning it and turning it because everything is in the Torah. Sometimes some strange things are in the Torah. So you may remember there was a fad that some people were silly enough to buy into. Do you remember the pet rock? You ever hear of the pet rock?
Oh yeah.
So nobody thought anybody would fall for that, but the guy did well, and then there was a knockoff brand. But the Gemara was way ahead of them. Rav Abba had pet Israeli rocks before anyone ever thought of it. So really, he should get royalties. So I'm just to tell you that there were some very, very strange things that turned up. It was in the Torah at the class that we have in Baltimore. Your sister Shear was going to come visit you one day when you're not ready for it. We found Mary had a little lamb was actually a Gemara in Brachas, except Mary's real name is Abaya. So you'd be amazed what you find in the Torah. So that's number one. Intense love of Israel over there. Then we have, now it just has here Reish Ches, I don't know if it's Reb Chia, Reb Chanina, Misakin Maskale. He used to like to cherish the stones of Israel so much, he used to weigh them. Now there's different interpretations. Tosfos says, here it is, Rabbi Chanina. He used to like to weigh the stones because Israel's stones are supposed to be heavier. So he used to like to weigh them, and if they weighed what he thought was the right amount, he'd go, Israeli rock. I love it. Overall, an attitude is, I love everything about Israel, even if I shouldn't. I love it anyway. Rashi says that Rabbi Chanina's goal was, and this is very, very beautiful, he wasn't as so much interested in weighing the rock. He was always looking for rocks that people could trip over to remove them. Because he said, you know what? I don't want anyone coming over to Israel and something happening and they should say something bad about Israel. I only want people to say good things about Israel. So Rashi learns that he would go around any rock, any obstacle you could fall over, he would move it. He goes, I want everyone to have a great Israel experience, which later on I'm going to tell you about Dr. Harold Ribico, Zechron Levracha. I was having a very bad experience in Israel, and he fixed it for me. And then finally, and this is really, on the one hand you would say, that's extreme. But if you really appreciate what Israel's all about, and what not being in Israel is all about, which this Kehila is extra lucky because you have Rabbi Weisblum, so he can give you a taste of what it's really all about. And every time Rabbi Weisblum speaks, even though he speaks the perfect English, better than some natives around, you always get that taste in his voice, which gives you a yen that, next time Rabbi Weisblum goes to Israel to visit his parents, I think I want to go with him. It's just something that your congregation has that other congregations don't have. Other rabbis can speak about it academically. Rabbi Weisblum can speak about it, and when he talks and he tells you his experiences, you really, really feel it. So you have one up on everybody else, maybe two. But listen to Rav Ami and Ravasi did. One of them for sure made Aliyah, maybe both. If you'd like to say hello to Rav Ami or Ravasi, go to Tveria, pick up some Mei Eden for a cheap price on the corner, and then as you walk up towards the Rambam's grave, Rav Ami and Ravasi are right there on the left. and there's a nice fountain over there. Don't drink the fountain water. Buy the Mei Aden at cheap price from the guy in the corner, and if you need your dollars exchanged for shkalim, the guy in the corner will do that too. Don't mention my name, okay? Just do it. So Rabbi and Avasi are buried right next to each other. They're in Tiberia, and this is what they like to do. If they were learning or teaching Torah, they kept moving away from the sun to the shade. The Gemara says, "Kaimi meishimsha latula or meitula l'shimsha." They kept wanting to move because they didn't want them or the students to have the slightest little experience of Israel. If it started to get the slightest bit warm, move in the shade, move in the shade. Because now this sounds like a bit much, but they figure, no, if you can make the Israel experience wonderful, make it wonderful. So to explain just a little bit more, enters the Ben Ish Chai. Okay, so the Ben Ish Chai, if you see a picture of him, you'd be a little bit scared because he wears a great big turban. He passed away around 1902, 1903. He was the rabbi of Baghdad. Imagine that. He was that rabbi over there, a brilliant fellow, explains a lot of things that nobody else does. A lot of rabbis will tell you he was the Chafetz Chaim of the Sephardic world. Very, very interesting person. And one second, this one next time I have to bring. He's a very powerful looking person. One of those pictures that just get you, very powerful, with the neat turban and everything like that. But the Ben Ish Chai, he talks about this Gemara. First he puts a really nice spin on Reb Abba kissing the rocks of Akko. And this is something that I think we've all done, or maybe you saw your grandma do, and you thought it was a little silly, but the Ben Ish Chai says it's not at all. He says, what's with kissing the rocks of Akko? He goes, well, let me tell you a little historic fact. In Akko, they have these rocks that are very, very good for making into souvenirs. Not everybody has at least one souvenir from Israel in their house. So the Ben Ish Chai says that what Reb Abba used to kiss is there were stone souvenirs from Israel, and people used to import them to Babylonia. And the Ben Ish Chai says in his time, so let's say he wrote this in the 1880s, he says, yeah, right now we're getting stone souvenirs from Yerushalayim, and people sell them over here or bring them here in Baghdad. So he says, that's what's going on. He says, this Rabbi Abba, whenever he would see a souvenir from Israel made out of Akko rock, he would go over and go, oh, an Israel souvenir. That's what he would do. So it's just like flowing over with a love for Israel. Even when he wasn't in Israel, he would kiss it. He would kiss an Israeli souvenir. That's how excited he got about his connection to Israel. But on the issue of moving from the shade to the sun, the Ben Ish Chai wants to give us a full picture of what's going on. That's part of the greatness of the Ben Ish Chai. A lot of these kind of Agadic Gemaras, there's rabbis who explain them, but sometimes, as Paul Harvey says, he tells you the rest of the story. And the Ben Ish Chai is very good at doing that over there. So he says like this. These two rabbis, Rabbi and Avasi, they were teaching in Israel, and it wasn't in the classroom. And sometimes they would be sitting in the sun, and the sun really wasn't that annoying, because it really wasn't the time of the day when the sun would be annoying, and you wouldn't really be upset. But they didn't want to take any chances. I forgot to tell you the Ben Ish Chai's name. His name was Chacham Yosef Chaim. On his driver's license it didn't say Ben Ish Chai. Chacham Yosef Chaim. Just want to clear that up. That's the Chafetz Chaim's real name wasn't Chafetz Chaim, it was Rabbi Israel Kagan. Israel M. Kagan. All right, fine. So he says these rabbis, as soon as they felt the slightest hint of heat, they said, maybe there's going to be two students. They're going to be uncomfortable, and they're going to go, Yuch Israel. If you talk to yeshiva, but with all due respect, Rabbi Weissblum, but I think actually you could relate better than anybody. If you talk to yeshiva boys and girls that just came back from Israel, you will hear, "Oy, Israeli mattresses. Ugh. Israeli windows, no screens again. So these people, they will not, your good friends are Rabbi Kostelitz, right? Mm-hmm. Rabbi Kostelitz from the community Kailo where I used to work and where Rabbi Weissman has lectured, he told my students stories how when he was a kid, if you left the window open, cats would come in and all kind of things would come in the windows in Israel. But he tells it with a smile. Someone else would... But these rabbis, they don't want to hear, and I don't say anything about Israeli matches. If you want to fix it, but keep your mouth closed. They said if there's going to be just a very few students who are going to have discomfort from the weather, we're going to move the class to a shadier area. That's what we're going to do. We're not going to take any chances. We do not want one student to say Israel is lo tov, and they did not want 1 square amma, 1 square foot of Israel to have anybody say the slightest ill word about it. So therefore, the Ben Ish Chai concludes, a person should learn a Musa Haskel, a good advice from this, to guard their mouth and their tongue from what they say about even 1 little foot of Israel. And he says, now this is very, very powerful. He says, do not insult Israeli air, do not insult Israeli cold or warmth, do not insult Israeli fruits, don't insult Israeli buildings, and even if it's true, and even if you live there when the non-Jews are in charge and there's a lot to complain about, don't say nothing. People have to keep a positive attitude about Israel. It's home. So he's really driving it home big time. So going into the modern times with all this beautiful thing, and I wish I could learn how to do that. I have it easier because only my daughter studied in Israel. My sons did not. Has visited, but I know it's easier. It's easier said than done. But this is where we're supposed to head for. And you see, Rabbi Weissman has a whole list of things he could tell you, but he's not going to tell you because he knows about all this. When I came back from Israel the first time, the Torah is very nice. I wasn't so religious. I just said, Israel's Nestle's ice cream kicks anything we have in America. But as Rabbi Wine says, God has a sense of humor. 2 years after I said that, I became lactose intolerant. so much for that. So I want to share with you, when we often like to speak about Rabbi Singer. Today, hopefully both brothers. Rabbi Singer, after being trained in the American military with all levels of fighting and getting smicha and always learning, Rabbi Mordechai Tzvi Singer, so he volunteered for the 6-Day War. So I spoke with a student of his named Robert Solzbank, who's the same age as me, and he said when Rabbi Singer came back, Rabbi Morton Singer came back from Eretz Yisrael. Now again, he went to Israel in '67 and said, I'm military trained for the United States Army. I've had jungle training, this and that, and I'm a black belt and all this, and a weight training. I'm ready to serve. And the Israeli army said, thank you very much, you can drive a truck. He said, but I'm completely trained. Give me a gun. I'm ready to go. I said, no, this is regulations. You're not Israel citizen. We appreciate very much, but you'll drive a supply truck, and this is what you're going to do. And of course, driving a supply truck you can be in harm's way plenty. My stepfather did it in the Yom Kippur War, and he was, which is one of the reasons I'm very proud. My mother married my stepfather. Ma, if you see this, give Grandpa Charlie a hug for me. So he was plenty of harm's way, and I think I'd mentioned once in the past, Rabbi Singer's nephew, Dr. Jeff Singer in New Jersey, told me that Uncle Morton confided to him. There were a few times he did not follow Israeli army regulations, and he took a shot or 2 or 3 because he just had to do it. But when he came back from the 6-Day War, Rob Solzbank, who's a photographer in Great Neck someplace, told me Rabbi Singer availed every chance he could to say something positive about the state of Israel, Israelis, Israel army. It was like the slightest excuse that he could have to say something positive about the state of Israel and its people, he would grab. Now those of you who have been in Israel, and those of you who have shopped in Israel, and those of you who have tried to cross streets in Israel, know that that's not always that easy. My daughter, the one who's suing Wayne State for anti-Semitism, my daughter is much, much shorter than her brothers. My daughter Shandel. And my wife and I are wondering, how is she going to shop in a makolet in Israel? Right? You know, in Israel, which is a wonderful place, they don't always follow like the lines, you know, who's first and second, you know? So, you know, the next time you go, Rabbi Weissbaum will teach you how to shop efficiently without dealing it. It's like, there was a makolet I fell in love with in the Rova Yehudi right next to the parking lot, if you could picture that. And I really love that because Israel has, hands down, the best chocolate rugelach and Danish. The best breakfast on God's earth is to daven where I daven at the Ramban synagogue or at the Kotel. You go and you get yourself some Israeli chocolate Danish or rugelach, and you get spring meats. Those in America they're overpriced, but in Israel they're not. You get those Israeli fruit juices, and then your whole day is better. So I learned a little bit about standing in line in Israel. And one time, as this tiny lady barged ahead of me, I said, "Slicha, Geveret!" And she looked at me like, "What the heck is your problem?" I didn't have any problems. But my little daughter, I figure, Shandel's going to go to Israel. She's a little, a slight person. And my daughter told me that she figured out ways very, very quickly that this is her place in line and you're not going to butt me. And she worked things, I don't know how such a little, gentle daughter did that, but she worked it out. So sometimes people come back from Israel and they say things. Rabbi Singer, forget about it. He would bend over backwards. And Rob told me his favorite thing was to speak about IDF technique. Now, of course, being a military man, Rabbi Singer had an admiration for it, but he said every chance he had to point out, well, the American Army's great, and we're the most modern army, but those Israelis, they do this and they do that. Oh, you just carry on. He kept interrupting the regular class curriculum. So Rob said one thing that really knocked Rabbi Singer over was the IDF's ability to completely camouflage weaponry and armory and ordnance in sand. And the Arabs would have no idea it was there. And then when they would sight the Arabs, in no time at all, they could undig their weapons and boom! So Rabbi Singer had seen the IDF do it several times over there, and I mean, I don't know anything about this, you do, but I mean, you also have to admire, if you cover something with sand, it gets messed up, So Rabbi Singer just loved to tell the students how you would believe so many times, they had things camouflaged and it was buried, and then they got a report that the Arabs are over there, and within seconds, uncovered, bam, boom, boom, Hashem Yisbarach, wonderful. So Mr. Salzbach said that there were several students from Great Neck that made Aliyah because Rabbi Singer came back with this. I mean, he always spoke nicely about Israel, but he came back with this overflowing attitude about everything in Israel is wonderful and everything they do, and the best army, and they're smart, and they're this and they're that. It was just, his goal was eventually to make Aliyah, but it just affected people when you have someone around that speaks to you like that. It doesn't have one negative word about Israel, just positive. I mean, it worked out well that he's buried there. Now, part of the reason Rabbi Singer was absolutely so infused about Israel was, of course, his learning in Baruch Yeshiva's background from his parents. His sister-in-law, Anna Reich, told me there was a family hashkafa of the Singer family and his wife's family. They all were refugees from Europe. They knew what it was to have the feeling of not to have a country, and they knew that America wasn't that terribly welcoming after World War II. His wife's family fled to Guatemala. So there was a very strong feeling that you have to have in Israel, you have to have a home. But what poured a lot of gasoline on Rabbi Singer's fire is one of his rebbes was Rabbi Meir Kahana. And we know Rabbi Meir Kahana was an extremely controversial person, and but we know, as many historians, certainly Rabbi Wine, say, in someone's lifetime, people say one thing, but wait a while and see what the Jewish people in history have to say. Because I think most people, even some of his biggest critics, will admit that in a lot of points, maybe we should have listened to Rabbi Kahana. People could be whatever side they want. But Rabbi Singer was very much influenced by Rabbi Kahana, and Rabbi Kahana has a statement here, and this is on loan from Johns Hopkins University from Rabbi Joseph Katz, who used to be a principal here a long, long time ago. Rabbi Joseph Katz, he helps the students there in Johns Hopkins, and he lent me this. This is from Johns Hopkins Jewish section. He has a whole bunch of these Rabbi Kahana magazines, and this one is from November, December 1988, Cheshvan Kisher, not that long ago. So there's a statement for Rabbi Kahana over here that really gives a feeling for Israel a punch. He says like this: the rise of the Jewish state of Israel came about not because of our merit, but in order to prove to the world the existence and omnipotence of the God of Israel as the one and only God. The existence of the state of Israel and how it came to be is national and universal sanctification of the divine name, and the fact is a Jewish state begins the final era of life for the Jewish people. It's an era of sanctification and redemption in every way, and we're not finished. The fact that there's an Israel places an obligation on the Jew as a nation and a state, not just a country, nation and a state, to act in every way we can to sanctify the name of God by Jewish strength and power that will force the nations of the world to understand and accept and to know and recognize that the Lord is one and His name is one. So, according to Rabbi Kahana, anything you're going to say detracting from Israel is a Chol Hashem. And he says, all the mitzvahs we can do and the way we act, he says it's all one big Israeli mission, because when God gave us back the state through His many messengers, that was a sanctification of His name, and it's God's way of entering us into the Mashiach era. I don't know if Messianic sounds right, which is a time for Jews to do as much Kiddush Hashem in every way and to be a light unto nations. So therefore, if that's the whole direction, then you certainly, you don't want to say anything bad about Israel in any way, because the point is glorifying Hashem's name through His land and through His mitzvahs. But his next part is a little bit scary. This course can be a terribly difficult one, requiring decisions and actions that appear frighteningly dangerous and that often fly in the face of the nations of the world and their anger. So we Jews are going to have a lot of faith with the progress of Israel. We need a faith that is deep and abiding in God and His concepts and His commandments. And no matter how difficult they may be, and no matter how impossible it may seem to fulfill them, it is this faith more than anything else that will bring us to sanctify Hashem's name and thus to the final redemption swiftly and with majesty. So if you're walking around thinking like that, so your whole attitude towards Torah Judaism in Israel is going to be very, very different. Such a powerful feeling, and of course that inspired Rabbi Singer. So I don't know if we can get this on the cam over there. I just want to share with you something for Rabbi Singer's brother, Rabbi Norman from Williamsport. Now, the Rabbi Norman Singer also was a outspoken Zionist kind of a person, and he went to visit Eretz Yisrael several times. And his Rebbetzin, she lived a long, healthy years, Rebbetzin Helen Singer, who I've met several times in Williamsport, said their most wonderful visit to Israel was the time they went and they had a meeting with Prime Minister Begin of blessed memory. And she even gave me the picture of her and her husband together with Menachem Begin. And Rabbi Singer just said that Begin was just about one of the greatest, most monumental people he ever met in his whole life. So one second, there's a really, really beautiful picture of Rabbi and Rebbetzin Singer together with Begin. As a matter of fact, it was right before a major meeting at Camp David, and Rabbi Norman Singer said, Prime Minister Begin, do you have a message that I can take back to my congregation in Pennsylvania? One second, I knew I should have marked it off. Come on, Prime Minister Begin, you were here last night. Come out, wherever you are. He's in here. Hold on. I'm able to Begin, come on out and see. Got it. Just when you thought. Okay. There was a pot. Now I'm walking over to David.
No, just hold it up.
Really?
I'll zoom in on it. Yep.
You are amazing. Now, can you see this? This is Rabbi.
Lift it up a little higher.
This is Rabbi Norman.
There you go.
Begin's much prettier than me. Someone could talk. Okay, so this is Rabbi Norman Singer and Revitz and Helen Singer with Menachem Begin. Everybody real close over there. And the Revitzin told me she has a large picture of this in her house in Williamsport. And it was a very, very wonderful meeting. Rabbi Singer went to visit there several times. So I just want to share with you a little bit from this article, which is dated 9/27/78. So they had arranged with them a meeting with Menachem Begin a week before a major Camp David session about goings on in Israel in 78. They had a 15-minute meeting. Rabbi Singer asked Begin, could you give me a message to take back to my congregation, Oav Shalom, at 1501 Cherry Street in Williamsport, PA? Begin replied, tell your congregation, we go to... Now, you knew how Begin talked, so just add that in. I should have had Rabbi Singer, I should have had Rabbi Weissman read this, so it'll have more effect. You'll re-quote it another time, it's a quotable quote. Begin said in his impeccable English, Rabbi, tell them we go to Camp David in goodwill, but with strong spirit. We will guard the vital interest of Israel. So you could read in between the lines what Begin was saying over there. Rabbi Singer described his meeting with Begin as the most inspiring 15 minutes in my entire life. But they were someone, his wife told me that he was absolutely in love with Eretz Yisrael. He was considering moving there, but I'll tell you the emes that she also shared with me. The shul sent them on a few sabbaticals, and they really enjoyed it, and they really were starting to think about making Aliyah. She said what stopped her husband was, he says, in America, if something does something bad to a Jew, so you say, all right, it's one of the nations, Gaulis, what are you going to do? But in Israel, a few times he came across Jew versus Jew, and his wife told me that her husband was a very gentle soul, and he said he just couldn't deal with that. He intensely loved Israel, but he said she said, living with a situation of seeing Jew versus Jew. I mean, it's a Jewish state. That's the way it's going to be. It's inevitable. You don't like to think about it. Now, I don't know what our rabbis and ksubas, how they would, if they would deal with it, the rockets and all that. But the reality was he was exposed to a lot of divisiveness till Mashiach comes and things happen. So she said he couldn't deal with that. Wasn't ready to deal with that yet, but he said they did come very close to making Aliyah, and it is a hard thing to deal with, and that's one of the blessings of the pasuk. Okay, so I'm going to save our dentist, Dr. Harold Henech Ribiko, for next time, because it's a very, very big story. The essence of the story is the first time I went to Israel, 2 rotten things happened to me. I lost my glasses in the Jordan River. And just to give you a feeling of what that is, with my glasses off, I know David's smiling, but I can't see his face. So if I lose my glasses, it's a problem. And I had a lot of misery and a lot of bad feeling about Israel. And God did a lot of miracles, because I learned if you pray in America, you get answered in a month or two. In Israel, if you pray, it could be a day or two or an hour or two. God did revealed miracles to save me. And then in Yerushalayim, which I'll tell you next time with God's help about Dr. Ribico, I was taking the tunnel tour. If you ever have a Friday and you don't have a lot of time, you want to do something very meaningful, take the tour with Rabbi Barnea Sullivan. He takes you in the tunnels on the side of the Kotel. Unbelievable what they did over there. So on that tour, I had a severe gout attack. Do you know what it's like to be in Israel and have a medical attack and you don't have your medicine because you thought you wouldn't need it? And you start thinking, oh, here I am. If I'm unconscious, how am I going to... It was absolute misery. And this Dr. Ribico, a dentist in Baltimore, he saved me, but the whole thing was miraculous. But it completely turned me around on saying anything negative about Israel. When I saw, and that was actually within hours, my prayers were answered. So we'll talk about that in Mitzvah Shem next time. And we also have some things from Rabbi Singer about having our dreams fulfilled, which is what Israel, a peaceful Israel, is all about. Thanks for having me.
la la la